War of 1812 was over, but it was an uneasy peace. As long as ships continued to patrol the Great Lakes, hostilities might resume. Britain wanted a defensive naval base from which they could supply their outposts in the upper lakes. Back in 1793, John Grave Simcoe had discovered Penetanguishene Bay, tucked around a corner from Georgian Bay off Lake Huron, with steep-sided hills, a good strategic harbour and deep water. The perfect place to build a new British naval and military base.
Well, Penetanguishene was established towards the end of the War of 1812 to act as a northern transshipment point to allow the British to provide naval control for the upper lakes. There were small schooners based here, the so-called insect fleet, the bee, the wasp, and the mosquito. And these served both as a naval force, but also as general transportation for the government in support of the colonial development of this part of Canada.
When the Rush-Bagot Agreement of 1817 restricted the number of warships either side could have on the Great Lakes, the Tecumseh and Nawash were stripped of their rigging and left sitting in the bay in a state of readiness, but they were never needed. In time, the hulls rotted.
The wrecks that are located in Penetanguishene Harbour include the Scorpion and the Tigris, which were ships captured from the Americans during the War of 1812, and also include the schooners Nawash and Tecumseh, which were ships that were built in 1815.
They actually started to build workshops for the shipwrights. They built accommodations for the sailors. They did build an immense naval storehouse, 3 stories high, to basically hold all the supplies you'd need to keep a naval base going. Built residences for the officers. And by 1820, there were over 70 personnel at this little naval base in Penetanguishene.
Most of the buildings were of wood and deteriorated over time, but the officers' quarters survived and have been restored.
But what we've done is we've represented the key buildings in the approximate locations where most of them were, and we give people a taste of what that original naval and military base was like.
Replica buildings include the homes of the assistant surgeon, the captain, and James Keating, the fort adjutant. He and the Reverend George Hallen worked together to build the area's first Anglican church, St. James on the Lines. The centre aisle is distinct in that it allowed for 4 to 6 soldiers to march abreast.
A feature area of the establishments or Discovery Harbour is the King's Wharf. It's where we have our replica ships of the Tecumseh and the Bee station.
Reenactors participate in annual events that represent the Provincial Marine and the Royal Navy in colonial Canada.
Well done.
And demonstrate the challenges of manning a longboat under sail or handling a 14-foot oar.
All are typical of the types of vessels that would have been used by naval, military, and transport personnel of the day. We have whale boats. We have a very large cutter, many sails on it, typical of some of the smaller transport vessels that would have operated out of here. We have a spritsail schooner, a nice simple breakdown rig that would have been easy to handle by sailors, but able to store within the boat. That was pretty crucial with boats because often they were associated with large ships and would be hauled aboard, so you had to have rigs that would break down and stow really well.
An Admiralty longboat would have been used by Henry Bayfield when he conducted a marine survey of the Great Lakes to create charts for the British Admiralty. Charts so accurate they were used right up until the advent of satellite navigation.
And as the years rolled by, Britain felt that it wasn't as critical that it kept a navy. By 1834, they actually withdrew their navy from Canada, and they were using soldiers exclusively to defend Canada. So from 1828 to 1856, this base became largely managed by the military.
Another British military outpost was on Drummond Island on Lake Superior. Originally a French settlement, descendants of the voyageurs and fur traders who'd married native women still lived there. When America was given possession of the island, the British garrison moved to Penetanguishene. The French and Métis families were all offered land and soon followed.
When they got here, there was no town. There was basically a military post, and there was one store inside the downtown, and that was it. And so they came here, and they're the ones that really brought a whole town to this area.
The Genealogy and History Research Centre at the Penetanguishene Centennial Museum and Archives has family histories dating back as far as the 1700s.
It's very different from other towns because we do have the bilingual community in this area, which is all surrounded by English areas.
Few people realize the degree to which this small establishment on the shores of Penetanguishene Bay really demonstrated the commitment of the British government to maintain the colonies, to maintain British North America in the face of growing American economic and settlement power. And as a result, the fact that there are original buildings here and that they preserve very nicely the naval traditions of the early 19th century means that it's a small gem. And it took effort to keep separate Upper Canada so that it eventually would become part of the country that we know.
For more information, visit our website on topoftheworld.net.